The Boy Who Killed for ATTENTIO and the True Story of Jesse Pomeroy, one of the youngest serial killers in American history. Part 1, The Birth of a Child PREDATOR Chapter 1, Boston, 1871 Boston in the 1870s was a city of smoke and stone. Factories lined the streets, chimneys filled the sky with ash, and children worked almost as hard as grown men. Violence was common. Discipline was harsh. And childhood innocence often ended early. In one of the city's poorest districts, on April 29, 1859, a boy was born who would later be known as the Boy Fiend. His name was Jesse Harding Pomeroy. No one noticed anything unusual at first. He was small for his age, quiet, withdrawn, often sick, but behind his pale eyes lived something ancient and dark, something that had no place in a child's body. Chapter 2, A Broken Home. Jesse's childhood was marked by violence and neglect. His father, Thomas Pomeroy, was an abusive alcoholic who beat Jesse mercilessly. His mother died when Jesse was very young, leaving him emotionally abandoned. His stepmother despised him. At home, Jesse learned one lesson early: pain was normal, cruelty was power. He was beaten for small mistakes, locked in rooms, humiliated in front of others. Teachers described him as strange and emotionless. Other children avoided him, but Jesse didn't retreat inward like most abused children. Instead, he turned outward. Chapter 3, The First Acts of Sadism. By the age of 11, Jesse began luring younger boys to secluded areas. His method was simple. He promised games, he promised treats, he promised friendship once alone. The games turned into torture. He stripped children naked, beat them with sticks, cut their skin with knives, bit them, choked them until they passed out. Some survived, many were too terrified to speak. Those who did describe him said the same thing: he smiled while hurting us. The violence wasn't impulsive. It wasn't emotional. It was controlled, and Jesse enjoyed it. Chapter 4, Arrested and released eventually. Complaints reached the authorities. In 1872, Jesse was arrested. At just 12 years old, doctors examined him and concluded something chilling for the time: the boy appears incapable of remorse. He was diagnosed as morally insane, a term used in the 19th century for extreme psychopathy, but the justice system had no idea what to do with a child like Jesse. So they did the worst possible thing: they released him. He was sent back into society, angry, humiliated, and more dangerous than ever. Chapter 5, Escalation. After his release, Jesse disappeared for weeks at a time. Children began to go missing, not beaten, not injured. Gone. In March 1874, the mutilated body of Horace Millen, a 10-year-old boy, was found in a marsh. He had been stabbed repeatedly, his face slashed, his body mutilated beyond recognition. Then another child vanished, then another. Boston newspapers began to whisper about a monster, but no one imagined the monster was a child himself. Chapter 6, The Girl in the Basement. In April 1874, police discovered something horrifying: the body of Katie Curran, a 4-year-old girl, was found hidden in the cellar of Jesse Pomeroy's stepmother's shop. The child had been brutally murdered. This time, there was no doubt. Witnesses had seen Jesse with her. Blood was found on his clothes. The truth finally emerged: the sadistic boy had become a murderer. Chapter 7, The Trial That Shocked America. At just 14 years old, Jesse Pomeroy stood trial for murder. The courtroom was packed. People wanted to see the face of evil, and what they saw disturbed them even more. Jesse showed no emotion. He did not cry. He did not beg. He did not deny. He stared forward, cold and detached. One reporter wrote, "He looks less like a child than a creature wearing a child's skin." Doctors testified that Jesse was beyond rehabilitation. The jury took only 1 hour to convict him. Chapter 8, Sentence. Jesse Pomeroy became the youngest person ever sentenced to life imprisonment in solitary confinement in the United States. He was never executed, only because of his age. Instead, he was buried alive inside a cell, and even there, he did not stop being dangerous. The True Story of Jesse Pomeroy. Part 2, Escalation into Absolute Violence. Chapter 7, A Child Who No Longer Pretended. By the early 1870s, Jesse Pomeroy was no longer simply a troubled boy. He was a predator in formation. Boston at that time was a city of sharp contrasts. Wealth and poverty pressed tightly together. Narrow streets filled with children, laborers, factory smoke, and the constant noise of industrial life. Kids roamed freely, unsupervised for hours. Discipline at home and in schools was harsh, but emotional care was almost non-existent. This environment was perfect for someone like Jesse. He was no longer satisfied with small acts of cruelty. He no longer wanted just to dominate. He wanted total control and pain, real, lasting pain. Neighbors noticed that Jesse had begun wearing dark clothing almost exclusively. His posture changed. His stare lingered too long. Children instinctively avoided him, though they couldn't explain why. Adults dismissed it. He's odd, they said. He's slow. He's just a bad kid. No one understood that something irreversible had already taken shape inside him. Chapter 8. The basement becomes a torture chamber. Jesse began luring younger children into secluded spaces, empty buildings, wooded areas, and most often, the basement of his family home. This basement would later be described by investigators as primitive, dark, and damp. A place where screams could easily be muffled by thick stone walls and the noise of the street above. Once inside, Jesse revealed his true nature. He beat children with sticks and belts. He cut them with knives. He burned them. He tied them up. He laughed while they cried. But what terrified survivors the most wasn't just the pain. It was Jesse's calm. Witnesses later described him as methodical, silent, focused, like someone performing a task. Not acting out of anger. He did not lash out. He did not panic. He did not lose control. He enjoyed the process. Several children escaped and reported the abuse. Their injuries were severe, deep cuts, burns, bruises that took weeks to heal. Jesse was arrested. Chapter 9. The first arrest, the first failure. In 1874, at just 14 years old, Jesse Pomeroy was charged with assaulting multiple children. The court was horrified. This was not petty violence. This was not schoolyard cruelty. This was systematic torture. Doctors examined Jesse and found him to be emotionally detached, lacking remorse, and disturbingly fascinated by pain. One physician described him as a boy without moral sense, whose cruelty exceeds that of ordinary depravity. He was sentenced to reform school, a place meant to rehabilitate troubled youth through discipline, labor, and religion. But reform schools were not built to contain monsters. They were built to scare children into obedience, and Jesse Pomeroy was not afraid. Chapter 10. Reform school only made him worse. At the reform school, Jesse learned one crucial lesson. Violence was power. He was beaten by guards. He was isolated. He was humiliated, but instead of breaking him, it refined him. He learned to hide his impulses. He learned when to be silent. He learned when to obey. He learned how to pretend. Other boys reported that Jesse watched them constantly, not with fear, but with curiosity. Some said he smiled when others were punished. He began writing disturbing notes, drawing violent images, and fantasizing about escape. After 3 years, officials believed he had improved. They were wrong. In 1877, Jesse Pomeroy was released. Boston had no idea what was about to happen. Chapter 11. The first murder. Katie Curran. Just months after his release, Jesse met Katie Curran, a 10-year-old girl who lived nearby. She was small, trusting, and familiar with Jesse. He offered her a harmless visit. She disappeared. Days passed. Searches were conducted. Posters were printed. Jesse calmly joined the neighborhood search parties. He asked questions. He looked concerned. He pretended to care, but Katie was already dead. Her body was hidden in the basement of Jesse's home, beaten, stabbed, mutilated beyond recognition. The brutality shocked even seasoned investigators. This was not a child acting impulsively. This was deliberate murder, and Jesse showed no visible fear. Chapter 12. Murder without consequence. Despite overwhelming suspicion, there was no body discovered immediately. Evidence was circumstantial. Jesse was questioned. He denied everything. Without forensic science, without witnesses, and without a confession, the case stalled, and Jesse walked free. This failure would cost another child their life. Chapter 13. The second murder. Horace Millen. In 1878, Jesse lured Horace Millen, a 4-year-old boy, away from his home. The child vanished. This time, Jesse did not hide the body well. Horace's remains were found weeks later, violently stabbed, dismembered, discarded. The city was paralyzed with fear. This was no longer an incident. Boston had a child serial killer. Chapter 14. The arrest that changed history. This time, Jesse could not escape suspicion. Witnesses placed him with Horace. His behavior raised alarms. Physical evidence, crude as it was for the era, pointed directly at him. When arrested, Jesse showed no emotion. No tears. No denial. No panic. Doctors examined him again and reached a terrifying conclusion. This boy is beyond reform. At just 15 years old, Jesse Pomeroy was declared criminally insane. He was sentenced not to prison, but to lifelong confinement at the Bridgewater State Hospital for the Criminally Insane. Chapter 15. A child condemned for life. Jesse Pomeroy entered Bridgewater as a teenager. He would never leave. He would spend the next 60 years behind walls designed to contain the worst minds in America. He would never express remorse. He would never admit guilt. He would never explain himself. When asked why he hurt children, he replied only, "I wanted to." No rage. No trauma explanation. No justification, just desire. Chapter 16. The birth of a legend. Newspapers called him the boy torturer, Boston's child monster, the youngest serial killer in American history. Parents warned children never to wander alone. The case reshaped how America viewed juvenile crime forever. Jesse Pomeroy was proof of a terrifying truth. Evil does not require adulthood. Sometimes, it is born early, and it grows quietly. The True Story of Jesse Pomeroy Part 3, Trial, Confession, and the Mind of a Child Monster. Chapter 11. A city demands justice. By the summer of 1874, Boston was no longer asking who committed the murders. They were asking what kind of creature could do this. The discovery of the mutilated bodies of Katie Curran and Horace Millen shattered any remaining illusions that Jesse Pomeroy was merely a troubled child. The brutality of the crimes, the stabbing, the torture, the dismemberment, horrified even the most hardened lawmen of the era. Newspapers printed his name in bold black ink, the boy fiend, the youngest monster in American history, a child born without a soul. Crowds gathered outside police stations. Parents kept their children indoors. Schools whispered warnings. Churches held sermons not about forgiveness, but about evil, and at the center of it all sat a 14-year-old boy, small in stature, pale, silent. Jesse Pomeroy did not cry. He did not plead. He did not deny. He simply waited. Chapter 12. Arrest and interrogation. When police arrested Jesse Pomeroy, they expected fear. They did not find it. In the interrogation room, Jesse sat upright, hands folded neatly in his lap. His eyes were dark, unblinking. He answered questions calmly, often with unnerving politeness. When asked about Horace Millen, he said nothing. When asked about Katie Curran, he stared at the floor. But when detectives pressed him harder, asking about knives, ropes, hidden locations, something changed. Not panic, not guilt, interest. Witnesses later reported that Jesse became more animated when discussing methods. He corrected officers when they misunderstood details. He showed no emotional connection to the victims, only fascination with the process. One officer wrote in his notes, "The boy speaks of pain as if it were a subject of study." There was no confession, but there was no denial either, and in 1874, that silence spoke loudly. Chapter 13. The trial that shocked America. Trial of Jesse Pomeroy began in December 1874 and instantly became a national sensation. Never before had the American legal system faced a case like this. The accused was 14 years old. The crimes were sadistic and premeditated. The victims were children. Evidence was overwhelming. The courtroom overflowed daily. Reporters came from New York, Philadelphia, even Europe. People wanted answers to one question: was Jesse Pomeroy a child, or a monster? The prosecution painted Jesse as something terrifyingly rare, a boy who derived pleasure from pain. A child who planned torture. A predator without remorse. They presented testimony from dozens of children he had tortured, medical reports detailing knife wounds and bindings, witnesses who saw Jesse luring victims, physical evidence tying him to the murders. Doctors testified that Jesse showed no signs of insanity. One physician said, "He understands right from wrong. He simply does not care." The defense had little room to maneuver. They argued severe childhood abuse, neglect by parents, a violent upbringing, mental instability, but even they struggled. No diagnosis no precedent existed. One defense attorney privately admitted, "If this boy is insane, then insanity has changed its face." Chapter 14. Jesse Pomeroy takes the stand. When Jesse took the stand, the courtroom went silent. People expected a frightened child. Instead, they saw a composed young boy, answering questions carefully, deliberately. He spoke softly. He did not cry. He did not show shame. When asked if he understood that killing was wrong, he replied, "Yes." When asked why he hurt other children, he paused, then said, "I don't know." But doctors observing him noticed something chilling. His pulse did not rise, his voice did not shake, His eyes did not avert. He showed emotional flatness, something doctors would later associate with psychopathy, a term that did not yet exist. One juror later said, "It was like listening to a grown man trapped in a child's body." Chapter 15. Guilty. After weeks of testimony, the jury deliberated. The verdict came quickly. Guilty of first-degree murder. The courtroom erupted. Gasps, sobs, shouts of anger, but Jesse Pomeroy did not react. He stood still when the judge asked if he had anything to say before sentencing. Jesse remained silent, not because he was scared, because he had nothing to say. Chapter 16. Sentenced to death. Then sparred in January 1875, Jesse Pomeroy was sentenced to death by hanging. At 14 years old, he became the youngest person in Massachusetts history to receive a death sentence. The nation was divided. Some demanded execution. Evil does not become less evil because it wears a child's face. Others protested. Killing a child makes us no better than the killer. Public pressure mounted, and eventually, the governor of Massachusetts intervened. Jesse Pomeroy's sentence was commuted to life imprisonment. He would never be free again. Chapter 17. Life in isolation. Jesse Pomeroy was sent to Charlestown State Prison, later transferred to Bridgewater Hospital for the criminally insane. He spent most of his life in solitary confinement. Why? Because even among adult murderers, he was considered dangerous, doctors reported. No remorse, no emotional growth, no empathy, persistent violent fantasies. He attempted escape multiple times. He attacked guards. He manipulated doctors. One report stated, he remains as cold and dangerous at 40 as he was at 14. Decades passed, the boy grew into a man, but the monster never changed. Chapter 18. The mind of a child without empathy. Modern psychologists who reviewed Jesse Pomeroy's case believe he represents one of the earliest documented examples of childhood psychopathy. Key traits: sadistic pleasure, early onset violence, lack of remorse, manipulative behavior, planning and control, absence of fear. He was not impulsive. He was methodical, and most terrifying of all, he understood exactly what he was doing. Chapter 19. Death in a cell. Jesse Pomeroy died in 1932. At the age of 72. He had spent nearly 60 years behind bars, most of it alone. No family mourned him. No one claimed his body. His death barely made headlines, but his legacy endured. Chapter 20. Why Jesse Pomeroy still haunts history. Jesse Pomeroy is not remembered simply because he was young. He is remembered because he shattered a belief humanity desperately wants to keep, that children are incapable of true evil. His case forced society to confront an uncomfortable truth. Some killers are not created by one moment, some are not products of a single trauma, some emerge fully formed. Frighteningly early, Jesse Pomeroy was not a boy who became a monster. He was a monster who happened to be a boy. Part 4. Prison, Legacy, and the Birth of the Boy Fiend. Chapter 19. Life after the verdict. When Jesse Harding Pomeroy was sentenced to life imprisonment in December 1874, the people of Boston believed the nightmare was finally over. They were wrong. Pomeroy was only 14 years old when the iron doors of Massachusetts State Prison closed behind him. At the time, he was the youngest person in the state's history to receive a life sentence. Newspapers across the United States and Europe reacted with shock. A child condemned for crimes of a devil. The boy fiend of Boston begins his eternal punishment. The public expected to see a broken, crying child. Instead, prison officials encountered something far more disturbing. Jesse Pomeroy showed no fear, no remorse, and no emotional reaction to his sentence. He entered prison quietly, eyes down, posture rigid, not frightened, not angry, just empty. Chapter 20. A prisoner unlike any other. From the very beginning, guards realized Jesse Pomeroy was not like other inmates. He did not speak unless spoken to. He did not complain. He did not beg. He did not cry. He followed rules precisely, almost obsessively, but behind that obedience was something deeply unsettling. Guards reported, Pomeroy stared at walls for hours without moving, avoided eye contact but watched people indirectly. He showed fascination with punishment and restraint. He reacted with calm interest to stories of violence. One guard later wrote, he was not insane in the way madmen are. He was cold. As if something human had never formed inside him. Because of his age, prison officials initially attempted rehabilitation. They failed. Chapter 21. Isolation and psychological decline. As years passed, Jesse became increasingly withdrawn. He was transferred to solitary confinement for long periods, partly for safety, partly because no one knew what to do with him. Doctors observed alarming behaviors. Long periods of silence, obsessive routines, repetitive movements, fixation on authority figures, lack of emotional response to good or bad news. Psychiatrists of the era struggled to diagnose him. Modern psychology did not yet exist. Some believed he was morally insane. Others believed he was born without conscience. A few argued he was pure evil, a term used freely in the 19th century. One physician concluded, "This boy possesses intelligence without morality, will without compassion, and awareness without remorse." Today, experts would likely diagnose him with severe psychopathy combined with sadistic tendencies, extremely rare in children. Chapter 22, The assassination attempt. In 1876, while imprisoned at Charlestown State Prison, Jesse Pomeroy committed one final act of violence. He obtained a knife, how remains unclear, and attacked William Schoeffel, the prison superintendent, stabbing him multiple times. Schoeffel survived. Pomeroy was immediately subdued and placed in permanent solitary confinement. When questioned about the attack, Jesse gave a chilling response, "I wanted to see if I could." There was no anger in his voice. No explanation. No justification, just curiosity. This single sentence destroyed any remaining belief that Pomeroy could ever be rehabilitated. Chapter 23, The death penalty debate. Following the assassination attempt, public outrage returned. Many demanded that Jesse Pomeroy be executed, despite his age. Massachusetts lawmakers debated whether the death penalty should apply to someone who committed murder as a child. For years, his execution was discussed, delayed only because of legal uncertainty, not mercy. At one point, his execution date was set, then postponed, then debated again. Eventually, the state made a historic decision. Jesse Pomeroy would never be executed, but would never be released. He would be buried alive within stone walls. Chapter 24, A lifetime in darkness. Jesse Pomeroy spent over 50 years in prison. Decades passed. Governors changed, wars began and ended, technology transformed the world, but Jesse remained. He was moved to Bridgewater State Hospital, where he lived in near total isolation. He never married, never worked, never left confinement, never formed relationships. Doctors noted that as he aged, his emotions remained flat. His intelligence declined slightly. His fixation on rules persisted. His lack of remorse never changed. Even in old age, when asked about his victims, Jesse showed no regret. One psychiatrist wrote shortly before his death, "Time did not soften him, age did not humanize him. He remains unchanged." Chapter 25, Death Without Redemption. Jesse Pomeroy died on September 29, 1932, at the age of 73. There were no visitors. No family. No mourners. His death barely made the newspapers. The boy, once feared as a demon, had become a forgotten ghost. He was buried quietly, without ceremony. No prayers were spoken. Chapter 26, Legacy of the Boy Fiend. Jesse Pomeroy's case permanently changed American history. His legacy includes one of the earliest documented cases of child psychopathy, major reforms in juvenile justice laws, early recognition that some children are dangerously abnormal, the beginning of debates about nature versus nurture in violent crime. He forced society to confront an uncomfortable truth: not all monsters are made, some appear fully formed. To this day, Jesse Pomeroy is studied in criminology, psychology, and forensic psychiatry as one of the earliest examples of a true juvenile serial killer. He was not driven by anger, not driven by trauma alone, not driven by impulse. He was driven by control, curiosity, and absence of empathy. Chapter 27, Final Reflection. Jesse Pomeroy was never rehabilitated, never forgiven, never understood completely. He entered prison as a child and died as a prisoner. His story is not one of redemption. It is a warning. A reminder that evil does not always wear an adult face, that childhood does not guarantee innocence, and that some minds are broken long before society knows how to recognize it.